Good evening, councillors and members of the public. My name is Ruth McEwen and I'm the Chair of Adult Social Care, Children's Services and Education Committee. I would like to welcome you to the committee, which is being held as an online meeting. With social distancing rules still in place, councillors are meeting tonight on this video conferencing platform instead of meeting in person at the civic offices. This is the first online meeting of the ACE committee since the Coronavirus Act of 2020 has allowed local authority committees to be conducted online, attended remotely by members and officers. The public and the press can still see and hear the meeting. The agenda papers have been published on the council's website and the Modern Gov app. These papers have been considered by members. I will shortly ask members to introduce themselves for the benefit of the public and also to ensure that all are in attendance as expected and that they can hear and speak to the meeting. Can I just remind members and officers to put the microphones on mute when you're not speaking. When called to speak, you should unmute your microphone and pause for about 3 seconds to allow for the slight time delay in connection. You must also remember to put your camera on before being called to speak, otherwise you won't be visible on the screen during your contribution. And obviously, as always, we're at the mercy of the individual's broadband connection. I will now do a roll call of councillors. As I say your name, please can you introduce yourself to the meeting? Please state your name and also any position that you hold. Councillor Challenger.
Thank you very much, Chair. Councillor Challenger, Vice Chair of this committee.
Thank you. Councillor Grashoff.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Councillor Grashoff from Peppard Ward and I'm Conservative spokesperson for Education and Housing.
Thank you. Councillor Hoskin.
Chair, I can't see that Councillor Hoskin has actually joined the meeting at the moment.
Okay. Right, we'll come back to Councillor Hoskin. Okay, thank you. Councillor Connell. Again,
sorry, Chair, Councillor Connell.
Okay, yeah.
But I know that she's got a few technical issues at the moment.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely fine. Councillor Pearce.
Good evening, Councillor Ashley Pearce, and I'm the lead member for education.
Thank you. Councillor Robinson.
Good evening, Chair. Good evening, everyone. Councillor Simon Robinson, representing Peppard Ward and spokesman for, or opposition spokesman for Children's Services.
Thank you. Councillor Terry.
Good evening, Chair. Councillor Liz Terry, lead member for Children's Services.
Thank you. Councillor White.
Good evening, Chair. Councillor Rob White, Park Ward Councillor and Green Group Leader.
Thank you, councillors. I would also like to introduce.
Did you miss it? I think you missed me out.
Did I? Sorry, Councillor Jones.
I wouldn't want to be missed out.
Councillor Jones, I do apologise.
Tony Jones, lead member for Adult Social Care. Thank you.
Sorry about that, Councillor Jones. Thank you, councillors. I would also like to introduce you to the officers who are in attendance tonight. They will not be on screen as much as the councillors, but it is right that I introduce people so that you know who they are and what their role is. We have Shona Douglas. Shona is the Executive Director of Social Care and Health Services. Also John Dickinson, who is the Deputy Director of Adult Social Care. We have Katrina Anderson, who's Director of Joint Commissioning. Liz Rushton, who's the Assistant Director for Berkshire NHS CHC. And we also have Kate Reynolds, who is the Director of Education for Brighter Futures for Children. And we also have Richard Woodford and Jenny Hazel, both from Committee Services. So that's everybody. Didn't miss anybody out there. That's good. Right, okay, moving on then. Declarations of interest. I haven't been notified of any declarations of interest. So please, I will pause now and please state if you have an interest to declare and the nature of that interest. Right, thank you. Moving on, so item number 5, minutes of the previous meeting. Can I ask you to confirm that the minutes are a correct record of the meeting held way back in January 2020? Please can members let me know if they're in agreement.
Agreed.
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 Thank you. The minutes of the other bodies, are we all in agreement with those minutes?
Agree.
Agreed.
Agreed.
Item number 7, petitions. We haven't received any petitions for this meeting. So we're moving on to item number 8, which is questions. And I've received 2 questions from Councillor White. Councillor White, please can you ask your first question?
Thank you, Chair. This question is on setting up COVID positive care homes. It has been reported in the news that councils have been instructed to set up dedicated COVID positive care homes in an effort to keep patients discharged from hospital with COVID-19 from spreading the virus more widely, as happened in the first wave of the pandemic. Please can my Green Party colleagues and I be updated on work to set up COVID positive care homes in the Reading area?
Thank you, Councillor White. Councillor Jones, would you like to reply on my behalf? Councillor Jones, you're muted.
Thank you, Chair. Reading Council will not be complying with the government instruction to identify care homes where COVID-19 positive patients can be discharged from hospital. We fundamentally disagree that this is the best approach for those patients or indeed for existing care home residents. The Executive Director of Social Care and Health, along with every other director in the county, received 2 letters dated the 12th and 13th of October 2020 from the Department of Health and Social Care, setting out a requirement to 1. Identify care homes referred as designated settings for people who are COVID-19 positive when requiring discharge from hospital pending completion of social isolation, and 2. Work with the Care Quality Commission to ensure compliance with standards in line with the infection control processes following identification of care homes in Reading who can meet this need. In Reading, we consider that it is not acceptable nor reasonable to ask care homes to take new admissions of patients who are tested positive for COVID-19 and are potentially infectious. Our position is based on our experiences earlier in the pandemic, which has left many care settings very worn down with the impact that this has had for the residents and their families. Most of the care homes in Reading would struggle to convert their premises to accommodate safely such patients without this affecting their ability to care for others. Instead, we in Reading, along with other local authority Berkshire West colleagues, are working with health partners on the basis of the Home First principle as the most appropriate way to encourage independence and well-being for our residents, and to support them they receive the care they require safely until they've completed their isolation or tested negative for COVID-19. We're also disappointed that the requirement for these arrangements is placed upon the Council's Executive Director, yet the funding for this is allocated to health partners. This makes no sense. However, we remain committed to working with the DHSC and the CQC to provide the best available care for some of the most vulnerable people in our town.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Councillor White, do you have a supplementary question?
Yes, please, Chair. And thank you for the answer, Councillor Jones. Can you clarify what happens if someone who is positive with COVID-19 and who obviously has high needs in the first place, if we're considering discharging them to a care home, what happens if their home isn't suitable, or if their home was a care home? Can you clarify where those people will be discharged to, please?
I think, Chair, to ensure that we get the best professional advice on this, I will invite Shona Douglas to come in. But I think Councillor White's supplementary question highlights the kind of one-size-fits-all approach from Whitehall, which simply doesn't apply in the real world and doesn't apply in Reading. We have relatively few larger care homes, and that's why we've adopted the position we have. Some will also remember that we made use of a commercial hotel in the first wave of pandemics, but we are now concerned about addressing each individual need. But I think to offer some further professional advice, it would be helpful perhaps to invite Shona Douglas to add to that.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Shona Douglas, Shona, would you be happy to respond to questions?
Yes, of course I will. Thank you, Chair. The way that we are operating it is that we are in a system-wide approach. So we're looking at options with our colleagues across health and social care, so our other partners in West Berkshire and Wokingham. And our principles are a home first principle, purely on the grounds of safety for the resident and safety for people, and we will make that happen where we possibly can. And the government has given our health colleagues the funding which we have to draw down from in order to fulfil that obligation. And Councillor Jones has discussed the Holiday Inn scenario that we mobilised at the beginning of the pandemic, and we are looking with partners about whether or not that is an alternative option. However, it is a high risk strategy. Our care homes suffered greatly during the first pandemic, and we need to protect all residents and ensure that we don't place other people at risk. I think it's fair to say that all of our care homes are working really hard to care for COVID positive people where they are identified, and are moving areas to keep people safe and are practicing safe practices, and are receiving a lot of support from Berkshire Health Foundation Trust and the CCG with regards to ensuring infection control measures. We did, in fact, only have 6 people who were COVID positive during the period in the first pandemic, the last 6 months swathe. So we don't anticipate high numbers of people, and that we will look at those options. But if people are COVID positive, we would just believe it's the wrong thing to place them in a care home where there is no COVID positive people. And so we will do all we can to use wraparound care, such as our community re-enablement team, or look at other options, or may even look at individual flats, maybe where we can do that. But that work is still being scoped out across the system at this current time.
Thank you, Shona. Thank you, Councillor Jones. Councillor White, you have a second question? Please, would you proceed with asking your second question?
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you to Shona Douglas and Tony Jones Councillor Tony Jones for the answers. This next one is on the impact of COVID on looked after children. What has the impact of COVID been on the outcomes for looked after children in Reading, especially during the lockdown? My Green Party colleagues and I are particularly concerned about the mental health impacts. What lessons have been learned for the coming second lockdown?
Thank you, Councillor White. I will invite Councillor Terry, the lead councillor for children, to make the response on my behalf.
Thank you, Chair. Children's Services supported over 289 children in care during the height of lockdown. This is now reduced to 277 as Brighter Futures for Children continue to make sure their living arrangements are the best that they deserve. We are also supporting, excuse me, a further 135 care leavers who are 18 plus. Since the onset of COVID-19 pandemic, Brighter Futures have continued to visit our young people in line with risk assessment process, which considers our children and young people's wider circumstances and risks, and I reported on this previously. For many, the visits have been virtual. For others, weekly visits have been face-to-face. We have learned that from some older care leavers that they like the frequency and ease of the virtual arrangements, and changes to IT capability to integrate both virtual and face-to-face visiting has the potential to offer a more creative way of spending increased time with young people. National restrictions for some young people change the way they maintain contact with family members, which for some moved from face-to-face to virtual contacts for a period of time. We know from some young people that whilst they need to maintain these relationships, these can be difficult face-to-face, and the ability to use virtual contact has proved a good means for them to keep in contact. COVID-19 has resulted in some young people having disruption to formalised learning within the school environment. Some young people were offered continued school placements along with key workers, you'll remember, but wished to have home learning as they told us that going to school made them feel different to their friends. Home learning was provided by carers and placement providers. Support for all children looked after was critical at this time, but particularly for looked after children who had identified special education needs and had education, health and care plans. The virtual school continued to track attainment and progress through personal education plans and feedback at personal education meetings. There were some great individual achievements at Key Stage 4, and 3 Key Stage 5 students gained places at university and continue to receive support. The virtual school advocated for children looked after, and where there were queries regarding exam gradings and acceptance onto courses, they were supported and challenged as appropriate. The personal education plan completion rate during lockdown period in the summer term was 100%. Pupil Premium Plus funding requested through the PEP process continue to support a range of targeted interventions for children, and over £100,000 of Pupil Premium Plus funding was allocated to support children's learning and emotional health and well-being. All Year 6 children were provided with a virtual school transition booklet, and support was offered to children looked after and carers by the virtual school education support worker to prepare them for secondary school. There were no permanent or fixed term exclusions of children looked after during the summer term. As corporate parents, we have made arrangements to financially support the housing needs of older young people to prevent any unnecessary accommodation changes, and we have been supported by fostering providers to increase collective oversight and maintain placement stability. The emotional and mental health needs of all of our young people is a fundamental priority. Their continued development and learning and social skills are closely linked to emotional stability and the achievement they attain. We know that due to trauma associated with being cared for away from parents and family, many young people have increased attachment and emotional needs. The added pressure of a pandemic for some young people continues to increase the concern they feel for separated family and themselves. Social workers and other practitioners are able to seek advice and support through the emotional health and well-being multi-agency meetings that are in place. We've also launched COOTH, which is an online mental and well-being service that's offering emotional and mental health support to children and young people aged between 11 and 24 years and is available up to 10 p.m. every day. The service was launched for Reading children and young people over the summer. In relation to virtual school, the Strengths and Difficulties questionnaire is an important tool which can serve as an indicator of the level of children's emotional health and well-being. This has been particularly important during this period, and social workers continue to receive support from the virtual school's education psychologist in the SDQ process. The virtual school education psychologist has continued to complete assessments which have informed and supported the delivery of targeted interventions funded via Pupil Premium Plus funding, and which has also served as evidence towards requests for statutory assessment, support on attachment, and developmental trauma has also been offered to foster carers, social workers, designated teachers and schools, along with the promotion of therapeutic thinking approaches to support children's emotional health and well-being. We have learned that many older care leavers have demonstrated maturity and insight in wanting to keep themselves and those around them safe, and have taken guidance and positive action. In working with health colleagues, we continue to develop a service that can respond to changing health needs. Over the period of the first national restrictions, there were no immediate health crises and interventions for young people, such as escalations in CAMHS referrals or immediate concerns for mental health. What is evident is that we are likely to see an impact over time to young people's experiences and potential anxiety becoming more prevalent. If there were to be a second lockdown, virtual school systems are in place to continue to promote the education achievement of children looked after. Our children and young people, carers and staff have coped incredibly well under difficult and unprecedented times, and we are proud of them all. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Terry. Councillor White, do you have a supplementary question?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Terry, for the very full and comprehensive answer. I don't have a supplementary question. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That concludes questions from councillors. We now move on to agenda item 9, which is decision book references. And as I understand, we have not received any decision book references. So moving on then to agenda item 10, the nursing dementia block contract procurement. I will now ask Shiona to introduce the report.
Thank you, Chair. I brought before you tonight the nursing and nursing dementia block contract procurement, and we are seeking approval to procure new block contracts of up to 15 beds each. That's a total of 30 beds. And each contract term would be for 2 years, with the option of extending it for a further 4 years, as agreed by whoever was successful in that bid. We've done some extensive research over the last 3 years around the need in terms of nursing and nursing dementia beds. And it's fair to say that with the move to personalisation and allowing people to have direct payments, that the options of remaining at home are the first fundamental key principles we would want to support for any residents. But that when people do require, and some people do require exceptionally high levels of care, that we have contracts which meet those needs, and it's both advantageous in terms of availability of resources and also advantageous in terms of value for money for both the council and for any providers, because beds are available to be accessed on an immediate basis. We want to look very clearly at what our needs have been, and as I said to you, we've done a fair amount of work around that. And we do know that we make on average of about 45 nursing dementia placements each year. And we know that we also, have other needs which need to be met. And in the report, we've detailed the percentages around that, around the nursing dementia and the need for demand. And we know that from our accommodation needs and analysis that the trends will increase in the years to come, and that certainly by 2035 we will need a bigger supply of beds. So what we're trying to do is to try and create some flexibility in terms of the needs going forward. So we're seeking 30 beds at the moment, and we're trying to put that out. We want to put that out to tender, and we want that to be flexible arrangements so we've got more choice, because we do know that most of our residents do like to be in the borough, and our current contract, which is due to expire, which is at Riverview, does actually one of those homes that people want because it is in our borough. So we want to kind of develop more choice in the market. So we want to look on the borders as well for other residents who may be living on our borders, so that we've got a more supply. And in some ways, having a more spread of beds across the borough would be more advantageous for residents as well. So we've laid out here the procurement plan that we would wish to start in January, and whilst we've detailed the advantages of that in the report, and we're seeking approval from members to proceed with that procurement. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Shona. I now call Councillor Jones to speak on this item.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and I hope that the committee will support the report as presented. However, I'd like to add a further amendment, a further recommendation to the report. And I don't know if everybody can see it there, but I'll read it out anyway. Add 2.3, which says that the council undertake a feasibility study to establish the business case or otherwise for the direct provision of nursing dementia residential care in Reading. And I would start by pointing colleagues to paragraph 3.1, which is immediately below the recommendations in the printed report. And the second sentence in that paragraph says that the council relies in the main on a market of independent care providers to provide the high quality care needed. Now, I'm quite happy with that statement, and as I say, I recommend the report as printed in terms of where we are today. However, I think looking forward and perhaps further ahead than the 2 years initially suggested in this contract, I do wonder whether or not, in terms of what are perceived to be increased demand for dementia care, a relatively limited supply number of suppliers locally, and I would stress local suppliers, and I would suggest perhaps that this be at the upper end of expense, that it would do well for us, I think, to take the work that's been done, the very good work that's been done in preparing this report, a step further and say, well, if the private market isn't perhaps able to meet our needs completely in the future, we should seek to extend the market, and that may include some form of direct provision. However, I'm not asking for work to be done and suggesting to the committee that I already know or we already know the answer. It genuinely is to seek a feasibility study about a business case. Now, if we bring forward a report at some future committee which says perhaps there is a business case for Reading, liaising with the local health authorities or other partners to meet future demand in Reading, then that might be worth pursuing. On the other hand, and I would hope that the report may consider experiences from other local authorities, particularly in the southeast. The conclusion is that isn't a role for us to follow, then so be it. I genuinely don't know the answer. I'm not trying to push a dogmatic line, but I do believe, because of the limited number of suppliers, particularly within our own borough boundaries, and I think Shona Douglas has already said, whether it be for the benefit of the patients themselves or perhaps in more ordinary times, the informal networks of family support, then I would hate to think that because the rules of procurement are such as they are, we may well find that we can only find quality value for money provision at the edge of our borough boundaries or even beyond. Then I wonder whether or not there's an alternate or complementary approach which we should pursue. So that's what this report seeks to do, which is to say, yes, in terms of where we are today, but looking forward, is there another option which we can pursue both legally and with financial sustainability. I'm happy to stop there for the moment, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. We do have some people want to speak on this, but can I just ask if any member would like to second the proposal to amend the recommendation? Do we have anybody that would like to second that?
Hi, Chair, Councillor Challenger. I would like to second that motion and reserve my right.
Thank you, Councillor Challenger. So we do have some speakers on the on this subject. I understand that. So I've got Councillor White would like to speak.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Jones, for the constructive amendment. Yeah, happy to support the recommended action and happy to support your amendment. I guess my only question is, what sort of timescale would you put on developing the business case? Yeah, that's my only question. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor White. Do we have anybody else who would like to speak? Any of the members would like to speak on this? No? Okay. Right. Thank you. So there, thank you, Councillor Jones. So there is an amendment to the recommended action that the council undertake a feasibility study to establish the business case or otherwise for the direct provision of nursing dementia residential care in Reading. So can I just ask again if we have any of the speakers?
Chair, would you like me to respond to Councillor White's
Thank
question?
you.
Yeah, well, thank you for his support. And as I say, this isn't something I hesitate to use the phrase "oven ready." This isn't a request for something which we're presuming the answer to. So it needs to be, and I'm sure it will be, a thorough professional report. In terms of a timescale, I haven't discussed or agreed the detail of this with our professional officers yet. I wanted to see whether or not it would carry support of the committee. If the committee is minded to support it, then certainly I will have an early discussion to discuss the capacity for us to undertake this work against all the other immediate priorities. And I wouldn't want, as serious as an important piece of work as I think this is and should be, given the considerable pressures on adult social care right now, particularly with COVID, but as generally we find, then I would want this work to be undertaken as speedily as possible, but not yet being a distraction from the day-to-day pressures right now. I would certainly hope that we would see some kind of feedback over the coming months. As soon as I've been able to have those discussions, I'll happily come back to the committee. I'll certainly come back to Councillor White to give him and the rest of the committee some steer in terms of what the likely timetable may be.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. So I haven't had any other notices from any of the members to speak on the item, or indeed on the proposed amendment. So can I just ask all members, is everyone in agreement with the recommendation, or would you like me to take a call vote?
Agreed.
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 Agreed. Agreed.
Agreed. Right, brilliant. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so we're moving on to agenda item number 11, which is the continuing healthcare fund from April 2018 to December 2019. And this report is going to be introduced by John Dickinson and Katrina Anderson. Sorry, and Liz Rushton.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, everyone. I'm John Dickinson. I'm the Deputy Director for Adult Social Care And just in terms of introducing this paper, this was a paper that was due to be presented earlier this year that was delayed due to COVID-19. Continuing healthcare itself was deferred in March as a process and reintroduced recently in September. So this is a retrospective look back at the period from April 2018 to the third quarter 2019. So in effect, this spans 18 months, what you're seeing today. Just really in terms of who's eligible for NHS continuing healthcare, well, it is people who are over 18 years old, who've been assessed as having a primary healthcare need. They are the people that are entitled to NHS continuing healthcare. And actually, to become eligible for it, there's a screening process where a checklist is followed by a full assessment of eligibility, which determines whether or not someone is eligible for that NHS continuing healthcare. So what the report says that historically in Reading, we've had a very low take up of continuing healthcare. And I think in the last 18 months, there were some commitments that were made. And some of these that were delivered were workshops. So we had workshops with health and social care staff to look at how we can increase the take up and increase the number of checklists. We had a national expert, Michael Mandelstam, come and deliver some training, and 65 members of our staff attended that. We've also had a CHC workflow in Mosaic, our client record system, which has helped to have some clarity on that process and that we can report on it much clearer. We've got good senior relationships with our colleagues in health. I know that they've struggled to get on the call today. I'm hoping that they are trying to get in now. But we have good relationships with them and discuss continuing healthcare quite regularly. But as you can see, if we look at some of the tables, I'm just going to quickly summarise what I see in terms of the local data which we collect as a council. What we've seen in that 18-month period is that the checklists did go up quite considerably, and this is key if we're to create a culture of staff who are skilled and knowledgeable. We want to see checklists increasing and reflecting those health needs that are out there in the community. Table 2 shows that actually, despite the checklist numbers, there were a fairly steady number that were actually accepted for assessment. So what happens is the checklist goes through to a full MDT assessment, which is health and social care. So the actual numbers of those checklists that made it through to an assessment is actually not significantly higher than the previous report. The third table, which was around the numbers of checklists which resulted in dispute. So in the years 18-19, there were high numbers of disputes, and these are cases where health and social care, there was a dispute as to the outcome of the assessment, and that was, as you can see, quite high. In 2018, we've managed to get that number down considerably in the last year, and Shona Douglas and myself met with our counterparts in the CCG recently to look at how we can reduce that even further, ideally get that dispute down to 0. And then the fourth table shows the number of CEHC cases that were agreed and accepted over that 18-month period. So it totaled 19 people. The next bit looked at national trends. So this is probably where you'll see that across this is data across the West of Berkshire. Since the reorganisation of the Care Commissioning Group, it's only the data is only available at Reading, Wokingham and West Berkshire level. But as you can see, the numbers in our patch, in our area, are significantly lower than South Eastern England levels. And that has been for a considerable time. But we are starting to see an increase, and we are starting to see that number drive up. So in terms of next steps, it's been very difficult. Nursing homes clearly, you know, being shut to the public, being shut to a lot of professionals as well. We've been looking at virtual assessments and virtual training in the way that we work with our colleagues in nursing homes. We're looking obviously to reintroduce more training and more awareness within that sector, because clearly in the nursing home is where you'll see people that will, you know, predominantly have health needs, and that we should be putting forward for checklists should their health needs be the predominant need. I think we've started to address some of the issues around low take-up of checklists. You can see that those have gone up in the last 18 months. And my commitment is to drive that up even further. We need to skill up our staff through training and good supervision and ensure that they're confident in making those checklists. And I think, you know, ultimately, as a department, we want to ensure that people in Reading get this support when they truly need it. So that's really all I wanted to say. I don't know if my colleagues from health have come on the line at all. Looking at the chat, I'm not sure.
John, I'm sorry,
I don't think they're able to.
Sorry, Chair, they're struggling. I'm just trying to have some text correspondence because they're frantically trying to get in, and they both say they apologise. Neither of them can access the live event, so apologies to have been given, Chair. I'm sorry about that.
Yeah, please don't worry. Thank you very much, John. Can I call on Councillor Hoskin to speak on this agenda item, please?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you. Well, Mr. Dickinson has given a pretty comprehensive and very informative overview of this. It's a shame that we haven't got our health colleagues on here as well, because of course the only way that we get to change the historical figures around the provision of continuing healthcare is really through that partnership working which has been developing. I realise we've had a difficult period through the pandemic, but it's really important that we come back to refocus on this, because at the end of the day, the provision of continuing healthcare should be fair and equitable, and there is a historic trend of low levels of provision, low levels of acceptance into continuing healthcare within this area, and I think that goes back to, I guess, a culture and the way that that has been assessed and over a period of time. So it's really good to see the intent to move forward and address this. It's also really important because, of course, continuing healthcare is free as NHS care to the people that receive it, and unlike social care, which is assessed on ability to pay. So it's really important to residents they have access to that care, and it's really important to us that it's fair and equitable. So I think this is a good report, and the recommendations are right. What's really important, I think, for ourselves as councillors and as a committee is that we encourage that partnership working, but also that focus is brought back to get those figures moving back closer towards the national averages, so that we can be assured that the people of Reading and wider Berkshire West are not losing out. So I welcome the report and the proposals that are in here, which is bringing back into focus the things that all have been set up. But I think this is something that we'll be coming back to, because we're going to have to continually make sure that we're maintaining the focus in order to get to where we want to be. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hoskin. Councillor Jones, did you want to speak on this agenda item?
Not at this point, Chair. I think the previous speakers have covered most of the ground. Be interested to hear what other members of the committee have to say.
All right, thank you, Councillor Jones. Councillor White, you wanted to speak on this agenda item?
Yes, please. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, and it seems a bit like deja vu to me. I was just doing a quick search on the internet, and I could see 2016 was when maybe one of the previous times this came back to the committee, and I think the headline's Reading worst off in the UK for NHS funding for continuing care, and it's disappointing that we're still struggling to to access this funding, and we're still well below the average at accessing this funding for the benefit of our residents. I was also a bit disappointed that there wasn't the finance section for this report was fairly light, when I understand that we could be losing hundreds of thousands of pounds a year by not accessing this funding, that the money's coming out of the council's budget, and that obviously could be spent on other things if health were funding some of our residents' needs. So then when we get down to the action and talk of checklists, I'm finding myself a bit sceptical in that we've been around this a number of times before and are still well below the average. So I guess, and I know we've tried different things, and I know this is a complex area, but I'm not. Hearing talk of checklists isn't really making me think that we've got on top of this. I'd have thought it would be something more sort of some larger effort to try and access this funding for our residents. So I'd like to hear a bit more of that, a bit more about. I understand that at one point we had a dedicated worker who was fighting the corner for our residents and for accessing this funding, and it might now be background with social workers, and it's social workers going up against nurses, and they don't have the medical expertise sometimes to argue the case for our residents. So yeah, I'm not convinced that just adding some checklists in is really going to make the difference here. So yeah, if I could be reassured, that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor White. I'm not sure if we've got any other members who would like to speak. Can I, would any of the officers like to respond to any of the points raised?
Chair, it's Shona.
Hi there. Thank you, Shona.
Yeah, thanks. And I don't know whether John would like to come in with me, and we might be able to do a bit of a double act here in terms of, I just really suppose I wanted to respond in terms of the work that's been done, and John can talk about the worker and those things. I just suppose that it's really important to recognise that the continuing healthcare element is we do as a council have a responsibility, and I know that if our CCG colleagues were able to be here, they would equally agree with this in terms of the fact that we should not be providing the council can't provide healthcare services. Two reasons for that. One is it's actually legal for us to do that, and secondly, it's not equity and fair for our residents, because as you know, our services in social care are tested, and some people contribute to their services, and so therefore if they're entitled to free healthcare, then they're entitled to free healthcare, and they should be getting that. So I would want to reassure Councillor White that our social work staff are very clear about what healthcare is and what social care is, and in protecting the rights of our residents, which is part of our job to do, and they're the discussions we've had with colleagues, and I'm sure if Liz or Katrina were here, they would acknowledge and agree with that statement, and what we can do is arrange for them to provide a written response for members if that's helpful, given that they aren't able to reply. So I think I just want to kind of reassure that and that we have. I know that historically there have been issues about whether or not we've been as diligent as we could be as ensuring residents have the right services. I think that John's done a lot of work to improve that with the service, and he can talk about the staffing element of that and what he's done, because I know he's been engaged in that work. But it is something that we know that members want to continue to keep an eye on, and that's right and reasonable for our residents, and we would do that. But we are in a position where we are having more debates with our colleagues. We are not in the position we were 2 or 3 years ago, and yes, we continue to need to identify those who have potential healthcare needs, and if we believe that our colleagues in health aren't making those right assessments, it's our responsibility to talk to them and to use the process. And there is a panel process which has a number of people, of which a social care professional is one of them, to be on that, to go through that and to enable people to challenge that where necessary. So I guess I'll hand over to John to kind of answer the frontline bits, but hopefully that's part of the answer that may actually hopefully give a little bit of reassurance to members.
Thank you, Shona.
Thank you, Shona. Yeah, I mean, I think it's Councillor White, it's true, it's a very challenging and complex area of care provision. I think, you know, our commitment, certainly since, you know, Shona and I have been in Reading Adult Social Care, is that we do fight for our residents, and you know, we do give them entitlement as to what's fair and equitable. And I think to do that, we need our staff to be confident, and we need workers who are skilled and knowledgeable. And I think that's the challenge, you know, that I've set coming into Reading, is to have a staffing base that do feel confident to complete the checklist. And the checklist is part of the process. There's no getting away from the checklist. We have to do that. And as we can see, our numbers have increased in terms of checklisting, and I want that to increase even more. So I think, you know, absolutely we need to fight for an equitable provision. If someone has a healthcare need and that's their prime healthcare need, we need to make sure that our counterparts at the CCG are aware of that. And I think my role is to keep on this and to spearhead that that drive for our staff to say, actually, look, I've been to see this person, they have a healthcare need. I'm going to make sure I do that checklist and fill it out to the best of my ability and with the knowledge and skills that I've learned. So, you know, I'm behind driving this forward, and seeing that number rise, as Councillor Hoskin has raised. So I think obviously we'll revisit this again. And I'd like to see that we have made further improvements at that point. But I do have a dedicated worker on it at this moment in time. And I will be ensuring that she is aware of these conversations, and that she's ensured, you know, feels that she has the skills and knowledge to have some of that challenge as well where it's needed. So yeah, we're absolutely onto it as a department.
Thank you to both Shona and John. Councillor Hoskin, did you want to respond?
Yeah, just briefly, and I think I'll sort of sum up as no one else is speaking. Actually, John Dickinson just mentioned something. I mean, Councillor White's both right and wrong. He's right in terms of, you know, how important this is, and the and you know, this is a tough challenge. I think the inbuilt, you know, culture is something that takes time to shift, and it's a shame that our health colleagues couldn't come through, because obviously what would be really good for the committee to see is that newer and stronger approach of partnership to ensure that you know, that residents are properly served. I think he's right in that respect. I think where he's a little bit unfair is sort of suggesting that the only next steps are around a checklist, which of course is part of the process anyway, and 4.4 does outline a number of those. But I think we're all agreed, aren't we, here? And I think this is the thing to take away, the importance of this as something to focus on for the benefit of our residents. So I sort of welcome Councillor White's interest, and I think it's been a good discussion. Thank you.
I'm just checking to see if we have anybody else. Councillor White, did you want to speak again on the?
Yeah, just a quick follow up, please. And yeah, thank you. I wasn't wanting to suggest that the checklist was the only bit of work that was being done. I know there's work going on a whole host of fronts, but just on the dedicated worker front, is that a social worker? Is that a nurse? Is that a sort of more of an admin role? I was just interested in what because it is a significant sum of money that would make that we're potentially losing out on by not accessing this funding. So I'm concerned that we put a good amount of resource into the person who is the dedicated worker who's fighting the corner for our residents. So yeah, what level is that dedicated worker? Is it quite a high level person that's able to sort of bring to bear a lot of medical and social care experience, or is it more of an admin position?
So I can answer that, Chair. So it's not an admin position. No, it is an experienced social worker. I also have experienced locality manager who's a social worker who's responsible for this area of service. So you know, I can assure you that the right people are on that, and I agree that, you know, because of the substantial sums of money potentially attached to this work, we do need that highly skilled pair of eyes on the job.
Thank you, John.
Chair, it's Richard, committee service. I have a number for Katrina. I can certainly try to ring her through the Teams app.
Yes, I think that would be quite useful. Then we can have her input as well.
Right, excellent. Bear with me a moment.
Thank you, Richard. Whilst Richard's contacting, it's Katrina. Can I just double check if any of the members would like to speak on this agenda? I haven't got any notification just yet. Nope. So if we wait and see if Richard can contact Katrina.
Hello, this is a voicemail for Katrina Anderson, Director of Joint Commissioning, Berkshire West CCG. Sorry, I can't take your call at the moment. Please leave a message after the tone. Thank you.
When you finish recording, please hang up or press the hash key for more options.
So we've tried phoning a friend. What are the other
I
options?
was just going to say that. I think that's a no for today then from Katrina, but thank you very much for trying there, Richard. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you.
Chair, could I make a suggestion? Sorry, it's Shona here.
Yes. Hi, Shona. Thank you.
I'm just thinking that it would be good for, I think, if Katrina could respond in writing to some of the questions that have been raised from the notes when Richard's got them, and I will take them back. Then we could present that, you know, to members of the committee, and at least then she's had her right to yes. Contribute, if that's helpful for you, Chair.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you very much, Shona.
Chair, can I make another suggestion? Sorry.
Oh, yeah.
So previously, a few years ago, we had really, I think, constructive and helpful meetings with a couple of NHS colleagues around this to get their perspective. That might be something that we could offer up to members of this committee outside of this main meeting, because I think that might be helpful as well.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you, Councillor Hoskins. Okay. I don't see any of the members that would like to speak on this. So if we're happy then, our councillors and members are happy to note the recommended actions in the report.
Agreed.
Agreed. Great. Everybody's in agreement. Thank you. Thank you very much. Now we're moving on to agenda item 12, which is the proposal for Berkshire West Public Health Service. And I will now ask Shona Douglas to introduce the report.
Thanks very much, Chair. So the report before you tonight is in relation to the proposals for Berkshire West Public Health Service, and I think everybody in the country will probably by now know what public health do, because if we hadn't had our public health consultant in David Monday, I think we would be a lot poorer for it in terms of what added value he's brought to us during the last 6 months, particularly in terms of this crisis. So this is about really strengthening our public health function. So currently we're in an arrangement with our 6 Berkshire unitary colleagues in a shared arrangement, which is hosted by Bracknell Forest. And we have Tessa Lingfield, who is the Director of Public Health across all 6 of the unitary areas. In the shared team is a number of people who really do commissioning in terms of a wide scale basis across the Berkshire county footprint, if I describe it in that way, and also do a range of informatics which are required by public health, and also manage the public health protection element of public health, which is around infectious diseases, so things like coronavirus, tuberculosis. So if there are infectious diseases, they take control and manage from that team the track and trace service in much more of a small scale than we're now trying to implement at the current time. But just to give you an understanding of the sort of types of work they do. The arrangement has become, I suppose, has really lived out its history in terms of time, because it's certainly clear that the demands on public health and the emergence of integrated care partnerships and integrated care systems across the health colleagues has expanded the role considerably, and we probably don't get in terms of what is necessary from what we need to as a public health consultant. So as directors of adult social care and chief executives across the piece, we've been having discussions, and I've been representing Peter Sloman at some of those discussions as well. We've been discussing what sort of model for public health would we want moving forward. And as we've moved into a sort of Berkshire West, which is ourselves, the CCG, the Clinical Commissioning Group, Wokingham and West Berkshire, and the east of Berkshire have sort of gravitated into that, their own integrated care partnership. It seems an opportune time with Tessa Lingfield, who will be leaving in the new year, to rethink about the model. And certainly this has been driven a lot by Tessa and her understanding of the role and how difficult that's been, particularly trying to meet the needs of all 6 unitary authorities. So that work that's taken place with the chief executives has come forward with a proposal to dissolve the current arrangement that we've got across the 6 Berkshires and divide the public health element into the integrated partnership footprint, so an East and West Berkshire footprint. East Berkshire relates more to Surrey and the Frimley Park Hospital, Wexham element, and ourselves, we're kind of more around the West Berkshire and the RBH. So it feels an opportune time to link that up with those boundaries, and that's what the proposal is, to move to that. The other element to it is that obviously if that happened,
you have 15 seconds recording time remaining.
That the so with that, obviously we would have the fact that the shared team would no longer be within our patch, and so Peter Sloman has offered to host it for the west of Berkshire. So
sorry, your recording time has expired.
In agreement
to leave your message, press 1. To review message, press 2.
Chair, I
to
think we might
re-record
need to hang
message,
up
press
from
3.
the previous
To
call. I don't know
cancel
if anyone
message
can
and
do that.
hang up, press 4.
Apologies, my fault. Let me...
Yeah, sorry about that.
Sorry,
Choose an option. To leave your message, press 1. To review message, press 2. To re-record message, press 3. To cancel message and hang up, press 4.
I'll just wait till that ends, Chair.
Yes, I think we should. That's a very
Choose
long
an option.
message.
To leave your message, press 1. To review message, press 2. To re-record.
I just clicked to mute the participant,
Sorry,
so I think that might have
Sorry, I've just muted it as well, Chair. Sorry, my apologies.
Okay. Thank you. Sorry about that. Sorry, colleagues. So Peter has offered to be a host for the shared team, and the principles around that are around Reading's links with transport and the ease of which people can travel from London, and colleagues in Wokingham and West Berkshire are in agreement that seems a sensible approach. What that would mean is we would just host that, and that would be managed by a Director of Public Health, which would be for West Berkshire, and that Director of Public Health for West Berkshire would be shared between the 3 unitary authorities, Wokingham, ourselves and West Berkshire. And what we're seeking today is agreement to dissolve the current arrangement and to proceed with advertising for a Director of Public Health, given that it's quite a challenge to secure directors, and we want to, in the current climate, secure a post as quickly as we can. So it's seeking agreement to secure that person, and for then shaping up what that public health team would look like. It is fair, just to kind of cover off the financial aspects, that there is a proportion of money, which is about 600,000, which is contributed by the West Berkshire. So we contribute to that shared team, so do Wokingham and so do West Berkshire, that money would then come into this footprint and we would shape up what that looked like. So it doesn't necessarily mean that all of that money would be used, but we do anticipate if we stuck with the current arrangement that it would cost us a bit more financially in terms of securing that public health consultant for the West, but that should be covered off by an increase in the budget, which we're anticipating on an inflationary rate this year. But again, we've got that money, and it may be that we don't spend that money and we don't need the extra, but it's just to flag with members the potential for an additional cost. But I think the benefits for the system would be tremendous, because that person would be a Director of Public Health covering all three, and the CCG, because they've got a responsibility to health as well, and they would be managed by each of the chief executives and have a work plan, as I've detailed in the report here. So I think, Chair, I've explained the broad principles and open to any questions that people have.
Thank you, Shona. Thank you. Again, apologies for a slight interruption there. Now, can I call Councillor Hoskin to speak on this agenda item, please?
Yes, you can. Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I welcome this. I think this is exactly the right thing to do. I think, in reality, there was always a trade-off between the affordability of the arrangements and the local focus. And whilst if money was no object, I'd love to have a fully stocked local health team, public health team with director in Reading. The relatively small nature of our unitary authorities means that the affordability just isn't there in terms of all the things we want to do with our limited public health budget. And I think this makes sense. It also follows on from what has been our approach over the last 2 to 3 years of a increasingly closer working relationship with our immediate neighbours in the Berkshire West area in order to move forward on the much more sort of closer work and integrated health and care arrangements, and to give us a stronger and more coherent voice within the wider area of NHS provision and planning. And I think that's really important. So it fits well from that point of view. And I think also clearly we had seen, just when we'd started to discuss things like tier restrictions in terms of the COVID-19 pandemic, due to our ridiculous and medieval boundaries, the edges of Reading very much flow over into the West Berkshire and Woking councils anyway, and increasingly we see how the kind of approaches that we need to take, whether it be in relation to pandemics or whether it be in relation to a whole host of public health issues, that working across that piece makes sense. But I think the closer focus of Berkshire West makes a lot of sense. So I support that. And I think in terms of what we do here, it also has to be seen in terms of the the history of quite, we've discussed it a number of occasions, the really sort of grievous cuts to public health budgets that have occurred to Reading and public health budgets across England over the last 7 years or so. And I think we can see now how really that was a terrible approach to take to what is a really vitally important area of what's the public services and the council does. So I think this is the right approach. I really welcome it and look forward to us setting up that Berkshire West that Berkshire West Public Health Hub that will then work with the Reading public health element, which will still carry on existing and working together. So I think that's an exciting new approach to take. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hoskins. Can I ask if any other members would like to speak on this item? No? Okay. Can I ask all members if everybody is in agreement with the recommendation, or would you like me to call a vote?
Happy to agree, Chair.
Agreed.
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 Okay. Thank you. Right, moving on to agenda item 13, the school standards and attainment. And I'll now ask Kate Reynolds to introduce this report.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'll just check you can hear me and see me. Yes?
Yes.
That's all working well then. Thank you very much. Okay, we've got a series of reports from education, which are in a sense picking up where we left off. So some of these feel a little out of date, so my apologies for that. But of course, given that we couldn't meet, some of the decisions that we needed to take and some of the information we needed to give you wasn't available to you until now. So we've got a series of reports. This first report looks at school standards and attainments for the academic year 18-19, and this committee considered the unvalidated data at its meeting last autumn, so in autumn 2019. This report is the report which gives you the validated data, which is not greatly different to the unvalidated data as you would expect. Just to fill the committee in, there is as yet no data available for the academic year 19-20. Members will be aware of the situation in terms of exams through the summer, and we don't yet have that information. We also don't believe that there will be school league tables produced on the basis of the 19-20 information. So in a sense, 18-19 is the most up-to-date information that we have for you. The report highlights performance against the key performance indicators for education within Brighter Futures. So if we move through those key performance indicators, KPI number 18, which is a reduction in fixed term exclusions. We've seen a continued decrease and rate for 18-19, where Reading is below the England average. We believe this is partly due to the impact of therapeutic thinking across our schools. This is particularly in the secondary sector. That picture of reducing fixed term exclusions was similar in the primary schools. However, we continue to have concerns about special schools where we saw an increase in exclusion rates in 18-19. Just in terms of secondary schools, to update you on the current situation, we are now picking up the cases of an increase of fixed term exclusions in one or two of our secondary schools. Members will be aware that our secondary schools are predominantly academy schools, so we have a different relationship with them, but we are raising our concerns about any increases in fixed term exclusions with the Regional Schools Commissioner to address that one. So that's KPI 18. Moving on to KPI 19, which is Key Stage 2 results and the gap in attainment for disadvantaged pupils. Here, the data from 18-19 shows a small narrowing of the gap between disadvantaged pupils and other pupils. However, Reading remains in the bottom quartile of all local authorities. However, for children who are looked after, and Councillor Terry gave you the response in terms of children looked after, our virtual school continues to support these children very, very well. However, for 2021, so this academic year, there will be a greater focus on Key Stage 2 and the need to support schools to improve performance in this area. In terms of KPI 20, which is Key Stage 4, Attainment 8, and again the gap for disadvantaged pupils, although overall performance in Key Stage 4 is strong, and we must remember that some of our secondary schools are some of the best schools in the country, for pupils from disadvantaged backgrounds, the results are not as good as we would wish. The performance of secondary schools is mixed. Only 31% of secondary age pupils with free school meals reach Attainment 8 and have good enough results at GCSEs to give them access to further education, employment and training. Our post-16 work, which is in a separate report we'll talk about later, outlines some of our strategies to support this group of young people. In terms then of KPI 21, which is the percentage of good or outstanding schools, outstanding being the top ranking in Ofsted terms, the majority of locally maintained schools are good or outstanding, and only 2 schools are in the requires improvement category. Ofsted introduced a new framework for inspection from September 2019, and we've had 4 Reading schools which were inspected under that new framework. 3 maintained their ratings and 1 inspection is incomplete, and we are expecting that incomplete inspection to be completed in 2021. Ofsted are currently doing 2-day reassurance visits to schools and will be recommencing full inspections in 2021. So I just want to commend this report to members. As I say, there's nothing new in there, but it is the validated as distinct from the unvalidated data. The unvalidated data you saw a year ago, and this is the validated data. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Kate. Thank you for that. I would like to call on Councillor Pearce to speak on this item.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Kate Reynolds, for the comprehensive summary. As mentioned, obviously a lot has happened with our school since, but it's very useful to know where we are and where we need to be from these figures. There are definitely things we need to improve. The gaps at Key Stage 2, which will be a focus as mentioned, and the disadvantage gap at Key Stage 4. But especially on this, I want to mention that schools don't operate in a vacuum. Pupils only spend around 15% of their year in school, actually. And as we've seen this week, years of austerity and impacts of COVID have exacerbated poverty and disadvantage, but not quite enough so that this government will fund feeding them during the holidays. Myself and Councillor Terry are very concerned with the impact this might have on the over 5,000 pupils eligible across Reading, and would still urge the government to reconsider that decision. But there are positives in here, as mentioned. The Key Stage 2 gap is narrowing, even though it's still there. Exclusions in this period are falling, and we're still working on that. And as just mentioned, the Ofsted outcomes remain strong, and well done to those schools who were relatively recently pre-COVID came through their inspections. And obviously this data is slightly old now, but obviously all this is work on top of schools doing all they currently can just to stay open, which I still commend them for, and would like to remind my teacher colleagues in Reading we're one day away from that well-earned break for a week.
Thank you, Councillor Pearce. Now, Councillor Grasshoff, would you like to speak on this item?
Hi, thanks, Chair. Yeah, I wanted to echo Councillor Pearce's thoughts about how unbelievably well schools have done this term just to stay open. It has been so difficult, and I'm just in awe of the head teachers who've managed to keep everyone on track and keep everyone going. And yes, what a well-earned half term for everybody who's been involved. I just wanted to ask a very, very quick question about the secondary schools. I know, as you said, Kate, that they're obviously, a lot of them are academies. Has the therapeutic approach been taken up by them? Have we been working with them to try and implement it in secondary schools? Or has there sort of been a little bit of pushback against that?
Okay, I'm happy to respond, Chair. Would you like me to respond to that point?
Yes,
yes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor, for an excellent question. If I say to you very gently that we see a correlation between those who haven't taken up our therapeutic thinking offer and the outcome in terms of an increased rate of fixed term exclusion, you'll realise why it is I am raising that with the Regional Schools Commissioner. Most of our schools have done, but not every single one has. So we will be pushing that again. So thank you for that question.
Thank you. Thanks for the answer.
Thank you.
Thank you. I can't see any councillors or members that want to speak on this agenda item. So again, can I ask all members if everyone is in agreement with the recommendations, or would you like me to call a vote? Is everybody in agreement?
Agree.
Agreed.
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 Thank you very much. Moving on then to agenda item 14, which is schools admissions, again to be presented and introduced by Kate Reynolds. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Chair. And may I also join with members in thanking schools for all the hard work they have done. And like them, I am very much looking forward to about 5 or 6 o'clock tomorrow afternoon, where the wine is in the fridge already. So that will be a nice thing to look forward to. They have worked incredibly hard, and they have been working since March. Remember, they haven't actually stopped during lockdown. Anyway, moving on to this report, which is about school admissions. This report updates the committee on the position for September 2020 and reports on the government's consultation on for changes. The government's consultation in June 2020 on admission changes. No major changes are proposed currently by the government to admissions. However, there may be some changes to reflect the Children in Need review and the white paper on domestic abuse. And we will bring those, if there are changes which then impact on our school admissions policy, we will bring those to the committee in due course. Reading continues to offer the majority of parents their first, second, third or fourth preference. For primary, in the primary sector, over 96% of parents received one of their 4 preferences. For secondaries, this was over 90%. However, there's still some pressure on secondary places, which will be relieved when the new River Academy opens from September 2023. A further report on admissions with recommendations for the 2022-23 admissions round will be brought to you in February 2021. Sorry, there's an awful lot of dates in there. But
thank you, Kate. Can I ask Councillor Pearce to speak now?
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, again, a huge thank you to everyone in the admissions team for adapting so quickly to the situation with COVID, and they had to work remotely. So managing the admissions under that was excellently done. We see again a rise in the number of applicants to Reading schools, which is a real vote of confidence for our schools, their leaders, the teachers, and the environments that they've created in those schools. As mentioned, the huge majority of our primary and secondary applicants have obtained first or second preferences, and our number of surplus places is down. And as mentioned, we'd also like to welcome, first of all, Green Park to our family of primary schools down in South Reading, who opened in September, and soon River Academy in a couple of years as our new secondary school. We know that they will help us keep this admissions trend positive in Reading.
Thank you, Councillor Pearce. Now, do we have any councillors members that would like to speak on this item? No. Thank you. Can I ask again?
Sorry, Chair. Councillor Grassoff has asked to speak, I think, has she?
I think that, oh, I do apologise. I thought that was on the previous item.
It might be the previous item.
It was, sorry, it was the previous item. I don't have anything to say on this. Thank you.
Right, anybody else like to speak on this? No. Okay, can I ask again then if all members are in agreement with the recommendations, or would like me to call a vote?
Agreed.
Yeah, agreed. Thank you.
Agreed.
Right, thank you. Moving on then to agenda item 15. It's home to school transport policy. Again, to be presented and introduced by Kate Reynolds.
thank you again, Chair. Let me just, yes, you can hear me and see me. That's fantastic. Yeah. And again, this is in a sense a tidying up report because, of course, we have moved into 2020-2021 academic year. So this report updates the committee on the home to school transport policy pertaining to the academic year starting September 2020. I'd like to express my thanks to the councillor from Peppard who highlighted the typo in the covering report. For the minutes, it is paragraph 3.2, not 3.7 of the attached policy, which represents the only change for 2020. And that change is to confirm that children and young people in the RG4 postcode are entitled to transport to Maiden Early Chiltern Edge. That's the only change that we have proposed and would like the committee to consider. Obviously, we rolled that out from September 2020 because we needed to make sure children were getting to school. We are also asking ACE to agree this amendment and to support a proposal to come to ACE in spring 2021 to cover transport for the 21-22 academic year. And Councillor Pearce and myself are aware that there's a number of key items that we will want to make sure are embedded in that new home to school transport policy when it comes in February. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Pearce, would you like to speak on this?
No, just to recommend. Thank you.
I can't see any members that want to speak on this. So again, can I ask if all members are in agreement with the recommendation or would like me to call a vote? Is everybody in agreement?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Okay. Moving on then to agenda item 16, children missing education, update policy and procedure, March 2020. Again, to be presented by Kate Reynolds. Thank you, Kate.
Thank you very much again, Chair. This is in a sense a collection of policies that you've, I think, seen previously, but we've brought them together in one document. So the children missing education policy brings together all the elements of children of statutory school age who are not attending school and or not receiving full-time education. So the report includes children receiving home education, also known as homeschooling, where, just to update members, we are witnessing an increase as a result of the pandemic. So if I give you some figures, because I think it's useful, in October 2019, we had 188 students who were homeschooled across 147 families. In 2020, in October, 275 students across 204 families. So we've seen an increase in terms of homeschooling. And this report gives you the procedures and the policies that are attached to our work around that. It also includes those children who've been excluded, those who have been what's called off-rolled, which is not good practice in schools. It also concerns children looked after and children subject to child protection plans. We hold a regular children missing education meeting in order to discuss each individual child and to ensure adequate support is available to those children. In addition to that, a monthly review of exclusions takes place, and if required, if action is required, it's escalated to me as Director of Education. And I've outlined in my answer to the previous questions how, if these are academy schools, we also take that to the Regional Schools Commissioner. There's also a series of standard operating procedures in place to ensure the safety and the learning for all of Reading's children. We commend this report to the committee for approval.
Thank you, Kate. Councillor Pearce, would you like to add anything?
Yes, thank you, Chair. The report says that total absence in Reading is low, and we're grateful to schools, parents and students for that. We believe that children learn best in schools, but obviously there are some for whom this is not possible. This document helps bring those policies together to help us deal with that. The procedures, checks and information in it will help us ensure that all pupils, even if not in school, are receiving a decent education.
Thank you, Councillor Pearce. Again, I'm just checking if any of the members would like to speak on this. I can't see anybody there, so can I ask again if all members are in agreement with the recommendations, or would you like me to call a vote? Is everybody in agreement?
Agreed.
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 Thank you. And moving on to agenda item 17, which is post-16 education update report. And again, this is introduced by Kate Reynolds. Thank you, Kate.
Thank you very much, Chair. And just to forewarn you, this is the penultimate report, so you've only got this one and the next one with me. This report is for information to update the committee on progress in this area and our plans to build on this improvement. Our post-16 careers advice service was previously outsourced to an advisor. In summer 2019, this was brought in-house under Brighter Futures. Since September 2019, there has been a significant push in terms of a significant decrease in the number and percentage of those not in education, employment or training, what are so-called NEETs, from 62% to 5.4%, raising performance from the lowest quintile in the country to the third highest quintile. So we've seen significant improvement since September 2019, when this service was brought in-house. Much of this is down to a significant data cleansing exercise and a strength of focus and leadership. We have put in place a 5-year plan to ensure early intervention to prevent NEETs rising through closer working with our secondary schools and working with providers to develop more opportunities for young people. The plan for the team includes some ambitious targets to ensure we continue to reduce our NEETs and not known figures, with a particular emphasis on supporting 19-year-olds with plans, with education and healthcare plans, to secure appropriate maths and English qualifications. I commend this report to the committee. Very happy to take questions.
Thank you, Kate. Councillor Pearce, did you want to comment?
Yes, please. Thank you, Chair. I think this is a really clear plan of where we are and where we want to be, and how we get there. I think most importantly, as mentioned, I'm very pleased that the service was moved back in-house. So now it's Brighter Futures that will continue to improve our offer. The long-term damage of being NEET is documented in the report, and we need to avoid that for our young people. Luckily, the trend in Reading is that the NEET numbers are falling significantly and are well below the national and local averages. We do know, however, that the post-COVID world will have a big impact on this. So this report will help. There There are many partners involved in this process, and hopefully some exciting projects mentioned, such as the Town Centre Hub and the networking events. Hopefully these will have a really positive impact in helping all our young people achieve their full potential.
Thank you, Councillor Pearce. I'm just checking, I can't see if anybody in the chat, I don't think any other members want to speak on this report. So can I ask again if all members are in agreement with the recommendation, or would you like me to call a vote? Is everybody in agreement?
Agreed.
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 Thank you. Moving on then to agenda item 18, which is Special Educational Needs and Disabilities, a strategic update, and again is introduced by Kate Reynolds. Thank you, Kate.
Thank you, Chair. This report enables the committee to understand the work that Brighter Futures continues to do to support children and young people with SEND. It shows an improving picture, in particular, increasing performance for the completion of education and healthcare plans within statutory frameworks, within the statutory time frame, and I'm absolutely delighted to tell you that in September we had 100% of our plans turned around within the statutory timeframes, which I think is the first time that's ever been completed. We've also had an increasing focus on ensuring sufficient local places, mapping our SEND need with our capital programme, so members will be aware that Oak Tree School, which is a school for SEMH and ASC pupils, will be opening just on the border in Wokingham from September 2022. We have also started work on an SCD unit at Southcote Primary School, which currently has 4 pupils and will increase over the next 2 or 3 years to have 12 pupils in it. And we are looking at the North End to place similar provision. We've also made sure that we now have a strand within our action plan and within our strategy, which is specifically on preparing for the SEND inspection, which we would expect early in 2021. We still have a number of outstanding issues that we need to address within SEND. In particular, there is still a need for more special school and specialist provision within Reading so that we can keep Reading pupils local and within their communities. We still have an issue with the annual review process, both completing the plans and the annual reviews and making sure that that quality is as high as it possibly can be. The key thing, I think, in terms of this report, which contains a lot of information, is for members to look at the development of the new SEND strategy and our time frame for doing that, because the current strategy will finish in 2022. So in Appendix 3, you'll get the plan and the timetable for how we would like to bring this forward, make sure we have a really robust strategy in place from September 2023 onwards. So again, the report is for information and to agree the action plan and the further and request a further report back to your committee in the autumn of 2021 on the progress on the new strategy for 2023 onwards. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Can I ask if Councillor Pearce would like to speak on this item? Thank you.
Yes. Thank you, Chair. As the SEND strategy says, SEND is everyone's business, so it's important we regularly update it, and it will come back to this meeting quite often. There have been huge improvements in the issuing of EHCPs that's been mentioned, and well done to all the staff involved in that. We're now well above, again, national averages, and this importantly enables our youngsters to access the support that they need. At Schools Forum last week, it was proposed also to increase top-up funding to schools to support those pupils with EHCPs, which will be a very timely boost to those. Just touching on what Kate's already mentioned, that the capital programme section says we're progressing with the 2 ASC units. Oak Tree School is progressing for our pupils, ASC pupils, to be located in Wokingham. And this is following on from, we've already had or in the process of the relocation of Hamilton School. We had our ASC unit at Blessed Hugh Farringdon last year, and the expansion of the Avenue Buyer class. So we're continually trying to add that provision for exactly the reasons that have been mentioned, that this enables us to keep Reading students to access the education and provision that they need and deserve, closer to home, closer to friends, and embedded in their communities.
Thank you, Councillor Pearce. Councillor Grasshoff, you wanted to speak on this item?
Yes, thanks, Chair. Really great news about the EHCPs being issued in Target. That's really great. Thank you for all your hard work. And I just had a question. I know you probably can't give as many details about what's happening north of the river, but have we any idea of time frame? Are we any closer to knowing sort of when a unit might be coming online up here?
Okay, very happy to answer that question through you, Chair, and it's a very, very good question. We need to continue to work in partnership with our head teachers in the north to make sure that the provision is appropriate both for the schools concerned and for the children and families concerned. So it is taking a little longer than we would like. We're hopeful for September 2020, but it may slip from there. It's a matter of putting the right provision in place. So thank you very much for that question.
Thank you. I guess you meant 2021, did you, not 2020?
Yes, I meant 2021. Sorry, it's because the original units were supposed to be in place from September 2019. So I've got very confused with my 2020.
Okay. All right, thank you. Thanks, Kate.
Thank you.
Thank you. Would any of the council's members like to speak on this item? No. Okay. Again, can I ask all members if everybody is in agreement with the recommendations, or would you like me to call a vote? Is everybody in agreement?
Agreed.
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 Okay, thank you very much. Well, thank you very much, everybody. That concludes this evening's business. Thank you very, very much for your patience. And it's the first ACE meeting online, and we had to, didn't go too badly. So thank you very much, everybody, and thank you.
Well done, Ruth.
Thank you very much. Excellent sharing. Thank you. Bye bye.
Thanks, Chair.
Okay.